Recording.
Awesome. I'll just double check the clicker. Sweet. Awesome. Kia ora, my name is Georgia Hawthorn, and I had the pleasure of working with the transport team over this summer research project. And I chose the topic of community development and public transport, a just transition for students at Otago University. I would like to start off by saying that I started my research by delving into the concept of social sustainability within itself. The best way that I can explain social sustainability is that its main focus is improving the quality of our lives by reducing inequality, improving cultural sustainability, and helping people make better choices about both their health, education, and work. When both social and environmental sustainability are implemented, this is where we create a truly sustainable lifestyle. The best way to explain this is via donut economics. Within this theory, economist Kate Ranworth came up with a circular graph where the center hole shows the extent to which we fall short of the UN social sustainability development goals, while the outer circle represents the environmental systems that we need to sustain in order to have a healthy life. However, I am a strong believer that we need to cater our sustainability needs to indigenous methods. Due to this, I believe we should view a sustainable lifestyle via the Oranga Huanui model. It's modeled after donut economics, and the original shape is changed.
Awesome. I go Carrie Cat.
That sounded like my mother over Zoom. That's very embarrassing.
Hi, Bob.
So the donut concept was flipped, with the environmental being on the eternal section, while the social was on the outer. Papatūnuku, Earth Mother, and Ranganui, Sky Father, are at the center of all living things, as they are the powerhouse of everything. And thus, they should be placed at the center of the spiral where energy becomes more potent. This brings me to what a just transition actually is. In New Zealand, we must meet the zero emissions goal that we set that we want to achieve by 2035. But we need to make this happen in a manner that is accessible and equitable to all Kiwis, regardless of gender, race, ability/disability, or income. I believe the best way to do this is by making sure we have accessible transportation that will allow for community development. Which now brings me to the population group that is very near and dear to my fifth year student heart, the student population. Dunedin is a student city. I'm sure we've all heard it be described as that. Otago University students is a very broad category. However, in 2021 alone, the university had 21,549 students, with 4,459 of those being first years. Which I'm not going to go too deep into which personas are, since my lovely teammate explained them pretty well, but I created some student personas. First, we have Emma, who is the placement traveler. She's in her mid-20s, has a dramatic change in timetabling between her class and placement timetables. She lives in Willowbank, and her last placement was in St. Clair. Next, we have Rose, a postgrad student who is in her late 20s. She lives on Agnew Street and stated convenience as her main reason for travel. She travels frequently and often commutes outside of her residence due to her working. We have Sam, who is mid-20s and is our outside of Studentville place traveler. She lives on Samhain Street in Northeast Valley. She typically drives alone and is the only one in her flat with a car. We have Tane, who is our social traveler. He's in his early 20s, usually walks from class as he lives in a flat on George Street. However, he uses travel time as a way to communicate and build relationships. We have Zhang, an international traveler in his late 20s and is doing a PhD. He lives on a university flat and prefers walking due to convenience and speed. He would like to explore the Dunedin city, but is confused by the bus system due to English being his second language. And finally, we have Liam, a Hall of Residence traveler. He's 18, new to Dunedin, originally from Auckland, and he lives in Selman College on Knox Street. He's new to the city, wants to build connections and join the community. We can see that all of these personas have significantly different timetables. However, there are common themes that run through all of them, such as students are social. They have plans outside of the university and often use their transport as a way to communicate. North and Central Dunedin are crucial areas of need. Accessibility, convenience, and frequency to campus is a critical concern for all. Accessibility, in order to promote student engagement in other areas, transport needs to be simple and convenient. Many students state walking as their primary mode of transport, and the statistic that I found the most interesting was that 50.1% of students own a B transport card. However, only 84.2% of students stated they've never taken a bus while studying. Student community participation is fundamental for social sustainability. University students who have access to accessible on-campus participation, such as reliable transportation methods, have been shown to have both better grades and fewer dropout rates. These campus social opportunities can also enrich your learning by building a better, more educated and prepared workforce. Having students engage in the large community outside of campus also encourages students to become permanent residents of the city. I decided to use the Dunedin District Council's long-term plans from last year as a way to evaluate the current transport system. I identified some key routes that may be used by my personas and then took them personally. I will be focusing on 4 key goals that I believe match the average student's needs. These include a connected city, a supportive community, a city of learning, and an active city. I go more in depth in my written report, but here is a very quick summary. A connected city, this would look like people like Sam having just as much access to the university community as someone like Tane, or like Zhang, who is new to the city, feeling comfortable exploring the further regions of Dunedin like Port Chalmers. I believe the bus system could be more accessible to the Dunedin population, including but not limited to a broader range of languages available on our timetable sheets. A supportive community, one example is Emma's ability to get to her placement in a way that makes her feel safe. This is because on her placement is she not only improving herself, but she's preparing herself to better serve her community. The uncertainty of arrival times, the unlikelihood of bus stops being exactly where one needs, and bus frequency are huge barriers to these students. A city of learning is what I think we can argue is one of the most important areas for students. This means Rose can have the same opportunities as someone that does not have to balance work and study. Currently, there is only one bus route labeled as a university route, and this does not cover a significant majority of campus or residential halls. Finally, an active community. This is something I think Dunedin does pretty well already. However, it can always be improved. In the last 5 years, there has been a significant push to make the Dunedin bus system a more viable option for residents. One excellent example was the OUSA Breather initiative. However, I do believe it's important to note that campaigns that seem to be targeted towards students lose momentum very quickly. So, solutions. I've come up with 2 potential solutions. However, these are pretty altruistic, if you would. University shuttles. My first solution is a university shuttle system, which is influenced by Penn State and North Dakota University. It allows easier access to university buildings, helps with traffic control and flow, as well as allowing for mobility management, all while allowing universities to have the ability to collect live travel data. To be successful, a shuttle must have pre-planned routes, frequency, both during academic and non-academic hours, real-time information on delays, and displays around campus or an accessible app. How does this work for my personas? Emma is one of the more complex students due to her constantly changing timetable. So while the shuttle may work well for times when she's on campus, If her placement is outside of central Dunedin, it may not work for her. For both Rose and Sam, I believe they could benefit from the shuttle system due to their key travel areas. Zhang could work well, especially showing him around different aspects of the uni and slowly building his confidence around North and Central Dunedin. Tane, using his travel time to socialize, I can't see him using it well. However, he could use it for sports meetings. And Liam is very much similar, where it could be good for building his confidence around Central and North Dunedin. Then my second solution is bus events, which is a more fun little solution influenced by the previous OUSA Breather campaign. One potential event is something that the uni has done in the past, which is bus tours, where a bus is parked on or near campus and students are walked through the whole process by a driver. And then another one is by turning the concept of taking a bus into a fun event. This way, we turn taking the bus into an experience, all while building student comfortability around the environment of the bus. Some possible bus events that I had a lot of fun imagining is a study bus, where we can turn the bus into a quiet, cozy atmosphere, a well-being bus that goes around natural views of Dunedin and encourages students to leave the busy city, which is very similar to the Breather campaign. A breakfast bus, because I can guarantee you a student will never say no to free food and coffee. A Welcome to Dunedin bus, which is targeted more towards freshers and new flatties in order to explore Dunedin. And the most gimmicky idea that I had, because I was rewatching Love Island, the speed dating bus, which could just be fun because students enjoy gimmicky little ideas like that. How would this work for our personas? I created this fun little graph due to needs and my personas. A quick little sum up is that social sustainability often gets overlooked in the broader scope of sustainable lifestyles. However, it is just important. The best way to enable social development is making community access straightforward and accessible. Effective public transport allows for community development, all while acknowledging New Zealand's transport goals. Students are a key demographic, and yet they are often ignored in Dunedin. Overall, more research will need to be done in order to encourage students in the wider Ōtepoti community. This project has been an amazing experience, and I've really developed a love for research, and especially qualitative research methods. I took the bus for the first time during this project. That wasn't an intercity bus. And I also met some amazing people, all while getting a wider knowledge of the transport system. I would like to end this presentation on one of my favorite quotes by Abby Hoffman. This quote influences me in a lot of the research and work that I do, and I hope people feel similar when they hear it. There is absolutely no greater high than challenging the power structure as a nobody, giving it your all, and then winning. Thank you.
Next up, we have Alex. Yes. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Matthee, and I'm a part of this transport team we have here today. I was tasked with researching, analysing, and assessing how social exclusion and stigma play a part within the public transport system, with a further delve into the specifics for University of Otago staff. This research was assessed through analysing various documents online and looking into international research as a way to reflect it back into a Dunedin context. One big thing of my 10-week research is that rather than giving clear conclusions, I've set up a baseline of assumptions that can be further built up on, worked on, and concluded on. In addition to this, throughout my research, I assessed 3 strategic priorities that can be used towards decreasing social exclusion and stigma towards both the University of Otago staff and Dunedin, thus increasing patronage on the bus system. One important note is that the staff perspective and assumptions comes through the data collected from the 2022 Staff Travel Survey. Another survey which helped in developing my report was the Staff Values and Behaviour Survey, which was conducted through June to August 2021, as it gave key statistics towards the well-being of staff and issues they have and are facing. To begin with, we must first define social exclusion and stigma within a public transport context. Stigma has been defined as any form of negative bias an individual or group of people may hold against public transport. This negative bias is normally formed from an event or action which has caused these individuals or groups to hold a negative view toward the public transport system and thus are now less likely to take it. But negative action in an event is quite a broad topic, so this was further broken down to look at it as the concept of social exclusion. Social exclusion is a very fluid concept in which it has the ability to uphold a menagerie of different contexts and ideas. However, the overarching idea is that of how an individual or group of people are not able to fully participate within a society, and thus within this context cannot fully partake in areas of society such as public transport. And as such, this speech will now further look into research undertaken, the assumptions built up, and the 3 possible strategic priorities that can aid in combating the specific areas of social exclusion we'll be looking into to help increase bus patronage in the long term. And as previously stated, this is a 10-week-long project, so there are many areas of social exclusion that have yet to be covered. However, there are 4 I'm focused on: community and cultural exclusion, ownership exclusion, and immigration exclusion. Another important note is that all these areas are not linear and instead create a network with one another. And so many ideas focused on within a certain area could be further broken down or looked at through a different lens in another area. These exclusions do not have clear concrete solutions, but can be improved on through effective future decision-making and prioritization. And so what I'll be doing is creating the 3 strategic priorities as the beginning to creating an effective strategic plan. To begin with, we will look at ownership exclusion. Ownership exclusion is a form of exclusion which comes from the ownership status of an individual. Owning or renting a house, owning a motor vehicle, or having another form of ownership. 2 of the key focuses within this area analyzed are forced car ownership and the inability to be able to purchase a home and thus being stuck with renting a house. The idea of forced car ownership comes from the context that an individual with very little money is forced to buy a car in order not to miss any opportunities and jobs that they would not be able to possess otherwise. And the inability to be able to afford a home is felt all throughout New Zealand, with another key issue being noted the poor condition of the housing and lack of alternative choice when it comes to renting options, constraining people into unfortunate situations where they have no say over the area and distance their housing is located. Forced car ownership is not an issue only noted within Dunedin, but can be seen from all throughout the world. The only way to clearly and completely get rid of this issue is to have a perfectly working public transport system. However, that's nearly impossible. And so with many individuals not being able to have a choice of renting options, which can not only cause many health issues, but don't allow with feasible transport options, a dilemma begins to be shown. The research looked further into applying these issues as a community issue rather than an individual one. And as such, the point of interest developed within ownership exclusion comes from looking into individual ownership issues as a collective one instead. So within a community stance, these individual ownership issues are seen at a larger scale with more eyes and suggestions combating them. This connects into strategic priority 1, which will be continued later on. Next, we will move on to immigration exclusion. Immigration exclusion showcases specifically the struggles that immigrants and refugees go through as they either seek exclusion from society, in which they are faced with emotional, physical, financial, or mental harm, or are forcibly excluded from society due to discrimination. The 2 evidence-based conclusions emerging were: 1, that the longer an immigrant stays, the less likely they are to take public transport due to transit assimilation, and 2, due to different cultural backgrounds and the difference in understanding of public transport when compared to their home country, forms of preconceived notion on the public transport system within New Zealand are made, and in most cases, these are negative ones. One reason this area of exclusion was a big focus throughout my report was the ever-increasing nature of foreigners coming to New Zealand. And being a foreigner myself, it's something that I've always been very aware of. And this is not only important due to the ever-increasing number of foreigners, but also the high number of both foreign staff and students situated at this university. And as such, this area of interest had the goal of centering on foreign staff and wanting to further integrate the staff into the New Zealand cultural community. This may be by offering lessons towards foreigners, which would include cultural education, teaching people of the area they live in, the history, and including them in community-based exercises or programs. And so with centering on the university, this would further include them within a Dunedin community, and as a whole would alleviate people from a lot of emotional and mental harm they may initially go through, and also can increase understanding of the local public transport system, connecting towards strategic priority too. The last area we will be looking into is community exclusion and cultural exclusion. The main reason for grouping these two exclusions together is that within my report, I used the research from both these areas to form one of my strategic priorities. Community exclusion refers to discrimination an individual faces due to age, gender, ethnicity, race, etc. And cultural exclusion refers to ways in which diverse values and ways of life are not accepted and are disrespected. And as such, those affected with this have a limited amount of opportunities, and so it limits their ability to participate within many sectors of society. Within this area, the main focus was looking into Māori issues and the issues towards the public transport system that may be overlooked due to inadequate amount of Māori voices. A lot of research within this area looked into accessibility of cultural activities and sites relevant towards being Māori, with issues such as affordability and safety being included. With the research linking the relationship between a Māori individual's well-being to the public transport system and concluding that there is an increasing need for involvement of Māori voices into decision-making within the system, which not only would improve Indigenous health and well-being, but including an increased Māori perspective allows for other avenues of venture that may not have been thought of before. As I myself have very little understanding of a lot of Māori culture, and research can only go so far, a lot of interest within this area would need to be built up from scratch. And so one very clear objective is that for further conclusions within this area, the current public transport system and values needs to be dissected through Māori minds, with Māori knowledge and values being further added into this. Within my report, I further look into these 4 exclusions, but for the purpose of the speech, I just focus on a few key aspects, and I will also be doing this with my international research. One of the largest components in my speech was the analyzation of international research into a Dunedin context. Various different countries were looked into, such as the United Kingdom, Australia, Norway, and many, many more, though I will be sharing 2 important areas from the United Kingdom and Norway. Within the United Kingdom, the key thing I want to focus on is the Transport for the North. The Transport for the North describes their role as, and I quote, "Our role is to add strategic value by ensuring that funding and strategy decisions about transport in the North are informed by local knowledge and requirements. They offer a lot of evidence-based research in which they deeply analyze the area of living and offer clear-cut plans to help increase strategic improvements towards transport across the north of England, to support people, to support economic growth, and to increase employment access. They deeply analyze forced car ownership within their own context and reinforce it back to how this limits access to one or more essential services, increases public transport and active travel usage, and increases financial hardship, mental deterioration, and also the lack of time for individuals to spend on leisure and recreation. As they discuss how this creates a never-ending cycle, leading to worse and worse deprivation. Now we will look at Norway. A lot of research was analyzed from Norway, as they have done a lot over the years to improve their public transport system. One of the key things I want to touch on is from Norway University Designed by 2025, which is an action plan designed by the Norwegian Ministry of Children, Equality and Social Inclusion, in which they propose national goals and strategies they were trying to implement from 2009 to 2013, which was also used as a building block to support the most recent action plan which was released in 2015 called the Government's Action Plan for Universal Design. The area I want to focus on is known as coordination and responsibility. This refers to, and I quote, the distribution of responsibility in the public transport area requires a high level of cooperation between the players. In order to ensure that the entire travel chain is safeguarded, the players' efforts must be coordinated. With this showcasing that all the regional councils, local authorities, and national administrations all create a coordinated and easy-flowing system to allow for each area of interest within public transport to be worked on and improved. With the aim behind the scheme being that with more coordination efforts from each area, it will contribute quicker to the improvement of the public transport system and will also allow the people from these areas to have their own understanding and say with what they know will be correct for their area of living, allowing for more support towards these improvements and thus any following improvements to come. Finally, throughout all my Dunedin-based research, with the data collected from the two previously stated surveys, and in collaboration with the international research, 3 assumed strategic priorities were created. Strategic priority 1, whilst viewing individual ownership issues through a collective lens, there will be increased awareness of the effect of ownership on the transport status of an individual, facilitating better communication. Strategic priority 2, incorporating foreign staff further into the local community allows for better adjustment towards the local environment and thus better adjustment towards the local public transport system. And strategic priority 3, by placing values and knowledge into the current public transport system and the current strategies put in place, this will allow for a more integrated and diversified system. This research has highlighted the importance of social exclusion and stigma within public transport, which has very little research targeted towards combating it within New Zealand and especially Dunedin. And so a lot of what my research did was to begin a baseline, which can be further built on and analyzed so to form long-term development towards this public transport system. In the future, I would like to create more concrete conclusions through designing, creating, and then holding interviews with a variety of staff. But it's important that these long-term issues are being discussed as they are still occurring and will continue to occur unless plans are developed to combat them. I've learned quite a bit throughout these 10 weeks, but I think one of the most important aspects I learned was to plan myself adequately. As I had quite a broad area of research and I could very easily turn my research into a tangent and fall down a research black hole, I had to learn when to hold back and understand that this can be continued at a later date and that it won't be solved in one project, but instead will take time. But beginning to look at it as the best start. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Caitlin.
Like, that's my presentation.
Yeah, so you are one of the top there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great, over to you, Caitlin.
So, hi everybody, my name's Caitlin and I'd like to present some of my findings as well as a few things I've learned over the past 10 weeks. So this is a graph produced by the Ministry of Environment that shows the makeup of carbon emissions in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There are 3 main areas producing emissions: agriculture, energy and waste. These emissions are having detrimental effects on the natural environment, causing issues such as habitat loss and ocean acidification. While each of these aspects has their importance, this research will focus on the subcategory of energy, transport. Transport contributes to 16.2% of New Zealand's emissions and is the University of Otago's largest sector of emissions. With the pursuit of a net carbon zero future in mind, the methods and use of transport must change. I've been working as part of the transport team, particularly looking at the commuting habits of University of Otago staff. Staff working at the University of Otago make up a large proportion of Dunedin's employees. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to look at their commuting habits and whether there is a chance to reduce the environmental impact that their travel is having. After researching this topic, my findings support the argument that great change needs to occur within the Dunedin and wider New Zealand public transport system if we want to encourage people to use it. This conclusion was achieved by focusing on 3 research questions. 1, what proportion of university employees use different travel modes and what are their reasons for this? 2, what is the potential for mode shift? And 3, what are the barriers and facilitators? A literature review prior to the study indicated that there are many contributing factors to pushing people away from public transport use. This map on the screen shows major themes drawn from the literature, with the size of each circle depicting its importance and relevance to the study. The theme of frequency of service was spoken prominently about in most articles as a major driver of public transport use. The other major theme relevant to the study is waiting time, with both of these factors found to have more of an effect on whether people use public transport than cheaper fares. This study used a mixed method approach, combining a survey questionnaire and 3 focus groups. The survey questionnaire, the Otago University Staff Travel Survey, was distributed via emails to departments and then amongst individual staff members. Administering a survey questionnaire allows for a wide range of data to be gathered and many different perspectives to be gained. 3 focus groups were also conducted in order to get deeper qualitative data. Focus group participants were obtained through a general email sent out to all staff. To submit their interest, recipients had to select the bus route that they lived on and were then grouped by route. This was done in order to allow the focus groups to flow more smoothly. Discussion was more easily facilitated when people were able to build on similar experiences and share mutual frustrations. This is a map produced by the Otago Regional Council and shows the different bus routes around and where they go across Dunedin. The first focus group consisted of people on the 77 route out in Mosgiel, the second of people on routes 14 and 18 around the peninsula and Port Chalmers, and the third was for those living on routes 10, 11 and 15 among the suburbs. Each discussion ran for about an hour and provided incredible insight into answering my 3 research questions. When looking at the first research question asking about the primary modes of transport used and why, the data from the University of Otago Staff Travel Survey was very useful. This graph is produced using responses to the questions, how did you travel to your place of work today? This shows that 33.8% of people travelled to the university as a driver alone on that day. The second most used method of transport was walking, with 16.4% of people using that method. Only 7.4% used the bus that day. Because of the way the question is worded and the fact that the sample who took the survey may not be representative of the actual population, we cannot state that these statistics are applicable to all university staff. However, this does provide some good information into how many people at the university might travel, especially when combined with the qualitative data from my focus groups. Data from the focus groups showed that most people used a car to get to work. There was an even mixture between people taking a car as a driver alone and those who would take children or other passengers. Participants living in the suburbs primarily walked or took the bus, while the car drivers were more commonly found coming in from Mosgiel or the peninsula. The longer travel time could be an influencing factor in this, and rather than making multiple stops along the way. So one of the big driver for people using the car was taking children to school, and the cancellation of the school buses along these routes forced more people to drive, with one participant stating, the school buses were cancelled, so whereas my kids used to take the school bus, they can't now. Other participants noted benefits in taking the bus that overruled any inconvenience, with one particular saying, I drive 10 minutes to catch the bus in Mosgiel, but I do that so I don't have to pay for parking and petrol. Other reasons for bus usership among participants were for environmental or exercise reasons. One participant used a mixture of car and bus so they could have reliability when necessary, but also contribute to lowering CO2 emissions. These sentiments are expressed through the final quote on the board that says, I'm mostly driving, but try to catch the bus at least once a week. So it's like sustainability, but also that reliability that my car ride is 10 minutes. Overall, majority of people drive a car as a lone driver, but this data shows that there are many incentives to use other methods such as buses, bikes, and walking. This leads well into my next research question, which looks at the potential for mode shift. This graph also comes from the 2022 Otago University Staff Travel Survey. When asked whether participants would likely consider travelling to their place of work in a different way, 36% stated that they would consider using the bus. The two other most likely options for participants were as the passenger in a car or by e-bike. These statistics are supported by quotes from the focus groups. Multiple participants expressed their desire to walk or walk to a bus stop, with one in particular stating, "I do feel very consciously guilty when I drive because I'm aware of the climate impact. I'd rather walk, but I can't." Some reasons for not walking were those such as disability, and others were because of health and safety hazards, such as walking up and down icy hills in the winter. Other participants stated, "Lots of people want to bike one way and bus the other, but the infrastructure was not there. They did not feel safe cycling through the city. The bike rack options at the university offer minimal security, and the buses themselves could only carry 2 bikes at a time. So while the inclination is there, in many cases the infrastructure isn't." People also expressed interest in using the bus because of the issues surrounding parking during the daytime. One participant stated that the bus is cheaper not spending money on petrol, not spending money on parking, and also gives them an opportunity to be active while travelling. The answers to the University of Otago Staff Travel Survey and the discussion generated in the focus groups shows that there is potential for mode shift. There are many aspects of public transport that facilitate people to use the bus, but there also are many barriers, most of which are enough to turn people away from engaging with public transport systems. This slide shows the 3 main barriers and facilitators that emerged throughout this research project to using public transport in Dunedin. These were primarily sourced from the focus groups and supplemented by the survey responses. The first major facilitator is the cost effectiveness of public transport. With petrol prices rising and bus fares decreasing, many people stated that they had made the switch to catching the bus as it provides great financial benefit in the long term. The second facilitator concerns environmental benefits. University staff are well aware of the negative impacts of driving cars and how they can do better to reduce their emissions. Most focus group participants who drove a car to work every day said that they felt bad because they knew it was an unsustainable practice. The third facilitator is parking. Parking is difficult to find and almost impossible during the semester, and students are using the same places as well. Many people end up paying a park for convenience, but this is also very expensive. By taking the bus, the task of trying to find a park is removed, as well as avoiding the large costs that may come with hiring a car park. These 3 facilitators are supported by the literature studied in my review and are suggested to be avenues through which bus use is encouraged. On the other hand, though, there are 3 major barriers, and many focus group participants stated that none of the facilitators are good enough to overcome any of these barriers. The first major barrier is waiting time. With the reduced bus timetable in particular, many people are having to wait to catch the bus at a specific time. However, there have been multiple instances where the bus will not show up at all, and people can be left waiting for up to an hour for the next one. This experience can be quite off-putting, especially when one is forced to wait in the rain or cold. The second major barrier is the frequency of service. This links to the first barrier of waiting time. The reduced timetable means that people cannot just walk up to a bus shelter and expect a bus to come along at any minute. Extra planning and time allowance is required, so pushes many to just using their car. The final major barrier is travel time. When a bus makes lots of stops and there is lots of road congestion, a 15-minute bus ride could suddenly take half an hour. This barrier was particularly experienced by those living further away, such as Mosgiel. Using a car to come into the university saves so much travel time, so it pushes those people away from using the bus. From this research, I have come up with 3 potential solutions that I believe would make a big difference to encouraging bus usership. The first is to implement an express bus or university shuttle. This would be a vehicle that would target university staff and wouldn't have to make lots of stops along the way. This idea was particularly supported by those living in Mosgiel. The second solution is to improve the reliability of the transit app. A common experience among staff was having the transit app give misinformation and not properly inform them if a bus was cancelled or delayed. Another aspect of this could be having a large timetable at the bus hub with up-to-date information about which buses are running and what time they will actually be there. The final solution is to ensure that there are school buses available for children. An issue for many parents was that they had to drive themselves because they needed to drop children off as the school buses were all cancelled or didn't reach their areas. Providing this transport for children could also assist in allowing staff members to make the switch to public transport. While this data has provided multiple insights, there are a few limitations of the study. Perhaps the most important one is the time during which the focus groups were conducted, which is during the holidays. This means the staff who participated in them may not be representative of all staff, and the information they give could be related to holiday times rather than during semester times. For the future, it will be interesting to extend this research beyond university employees. The literature would suggest that other members of the public will have very different reasons for using or not using public transport, and it'll be interesting to research if there are similarities in the ways that people could be encouraged. Here are a few topics of further research. These are all very important, but the time constraints surrounding this study meant that I did not have time to look into them as much. Over the course of this research project, I have learned so much, but the one thing I think I'm most grateful for is having the opportunity to run some focus groups by myself. I had never done this before, but it went well, and I have gained lots of valuable experience for the future. Thank you for listening.
Last but not least in this session, we have Kate. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hold on a second, just click on the screen.
Thanks.
Over to you.
Tēnā koutou, no oti poti ahau, ko Kate taku ingoa. Kei oti poti taku kāinga, kei te pai ahau, kei te whariwānanga o tākou ahau e mahi ana, no reira tēnā koutou. Kia ora everyone, my name's Kate, and this summer I've been researching at the Office of Sustainability. I've really enjoyed working along the team looking at public transport, and I also wanted to thank Ray, Pip, Hamish and Craig for their help, as well as the sponsors who made this work possible. So I've been using the concept of generalised journey time to explore ways to improve the travel time of the bus compared to that of the private car. Reducing the local emissions from daily commuters and individual private car owners is a major global challenge. The transport sector is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and is responsible for 17% of our gross emissions profile, according to the Ministry for the Environment in 2022. Increasing public transport usage as a more sustainable transport option can reduce the reliance on global fossil fuel markets and generate more sustainable and environmentally friendly cities. An attractive and competitive public transport service is required to incentivise this shift in travel mode. Public transport must attract people out of cars and retain ridership, and to do so, public transport needs to be able to compete with the car. High public transport shares require a concerted effort to improve numerous factors that define public transport service quality: efficient time travel, direct services, convenience, reliability, comfort, high service frequency, etc. The travel time of a bus trip relative to the equivalent journey in the private car is a key performance indicator when analysing the service quality of public transport. The higher the travel time of the bus compared to the car, the lower the public transport market share will be. Travel time for a car tends to be significantly lower than that of public transport in the majority of cities worldwide. There's been a strong global trend recently in public agents losing relative market share to private alternatives, and the transport industry is a clear example. We've witnessed great market share loss in public transport as a direct result of the increasing availability and improvement of private auto vehicles. This recent study was conducted in Norway in 2021. And it found that for public transport modal shares over 30%, the travel time of the bus cannot be more than 1.5 times the travel time of the private car for the equivalent journey. Public transport shares over 60% will only be achieved with travel time ratios that are equal or lower than that of the private car. Another study, which was based in Los Angeles by Chakrabarti in 2017, found that all else equal, small changes such as reducing the scheduled deviation per bus trip to less than 3 minutes or reducing the headway by 10 minutes can increase public transport mode choice by 30%. For those of you who don't know, headway is the amount of time between transits arriving at a particular stop. This illustrates that there are multiple aspects of the bus service journey that can be improved to provide an overall faster public transport service. This leads me on to my next point. Generalized journey time is a concept that I used in my research. It can be used as a means of representing the overall time spent undertaking the journey, as catching the bus is a multimodal trip. It represents more than simply in-vehicle time, but also takes into account other aspects of the journey related to time travel, including access and egress, waiting time, headway, number of transfers along an indirect route, and walking time to the bus stop and the final destination. So generalized journey time provides a nuanced picture of the actual door-to-door travel time. This is a graph in the Dunedin context, which provides an approximate travel time of the bus compared to the car for specific routes. So as you can see, these are the different routes travelling into the bus hub, and this is the time. The blue is the bus, and the red is the car. And as you can see, it takes significantly longer to travel by bus for every single route. Although this is an estimation, it's clear that in Dunedin, the bus service is not at a level that will support modal transportation shift towards sustainable options. It's difficult to promote a bus service as part of the solution to encourage shifts in travel modes due to the lack of service levels, reliability, and importantly, the inconvenience of the extra time it takes to travel by bus. If we're to successfully move towards public transport usage, there is a need for public transport to be made attractive to car users in order to be competitive within the market. So waiting time. Walking and waiting time form a large proportion of the door-to-door journey time, and scheduling of inconsistent buses for public transport adds substantial time to the overall journey. Waiting time when the bus is late incurs greater disutility among public transport users than time spent in the actual vehicle, which reflects inconvenience and inability to use that time for other purposes. Waiting time is directly related to service headway, and this can be categorised in 2 ways. Firstly, when the bus is of high frequency, passengers can arrive independently of the service schedule and then they'll wait at the bus stop for the next stop. However, if the service operates at wider headways, which it does in Dunedin, passengers will structure their day around a specific departure time and they'll fill in waiting time at home or at work. Walking to the bus stop. So travel time is a concept that must be isolated into several intermediate stages in order to be researched. It begins firstly with the walk from the point of origin to the bus stop. Then you proceed to wait for the bus to arrive, running the vehicle itself, which may include detours, and then finally the walk to the final destination. Whereas in a private mode of travel, such as the car, the majority of travel time is spent inside the vehicle and on the owner's own timetable. It's difficult to estimate a single value of time when that value will be different for everyone, and it will depend on multiple factors within the particular travel context. For example, the purpose of the trip, the time of the day, the characteristics and the abilities of the traveller. One clear issue in Dunedin is the accessibility of bus stops. So for example, on the Peninsula Road and the route out to Port Chalmers, the bus stays on the main road that travels around the harbour. And for elderly people or those with mobility issues or heavy loads such as shopping, it's difficult and impossible for some to walk up the hills to the suburbs such as Ravensbourne. And this problem is exacerbated in winter when it's slippery or windy or raining. And these conditions not only implicate the comfort of the traveller, but they also increase the door-to-door travel time. So a few immediate solutions for this. The buses are clearly not frequent enough, and if one is cancelled or full, the next is usually an hour away. This means that passengers have to plan everything carefully, and when they do, they could still be stuck waiting for a long time, as it's hard to know when buses are cancelled or late. So service reliability is a big issue that contributes to unwanted waiting time. We need increased frequency within the service, maybe every 30 minutes instead of 1 hour. And we need the service to be reliable. We can't have people waiting at the bus stop for an hour. I also looked at some potential bigger scale solutions for the long term. So in order to produce a faster public transport system that competes with the car, there are a number of organisational and institutional issues relating to policy integration that must be taken into account. So there's a growing need and acknowledgement for policy consistency across the transportation sector. One option is to increase the car parking policies by limiting the number of available parking spaces for cars at specific destinations. The public transport method will become more competitive. In a study on workplace parking provisions conducted by the Lele in 1990, it was concluded that of the 100 respondents who travelled to work by bus, 65% did so due to the cost of parking or the lack of available parking space at their work. So while these parking policies will increase the door-to-door travel time of private vehicle owners and hence encourage motorists toward public transport, parking policies are not simply the answer. Successful public transportation systems in the past in Aotearoa have been full systems with proper facilities and dedicated urban spacing. Now public transport is considered only a partial alternate system. The bus is forced to share the road space with private cars and other vehicles as equal. This has undoubtedly contributed to the decline in bus usage. Dedicated road space for public transport, such as bus-only lanes, as well as traffic signal priorities, will increase the speed of the bus relative to that of the car and would make for a complete system. They would speed up public transport that would otherwise be held up in traffic congestion, and this would be far more attractive to the user and would generate a shift toward public transportation and away from the private car. So it's critical to think about how these policy instruments could be developed in a complementary manner. They must be linked and packaged in a way that appears attractive to the city in general. And a quick case study. I looked at Oslo, which is Norway's capital and largest city. And it demonstrates how combining the improvement of public transport whilst reducing car space helps to enable a modal shift away from private vehicles. So approximately 760 parking spaces have been removed within Oslo city centre between 2015 and 2019. The focus for them was on connecting different parts of the region through the improvement of the transport system to meet zero growth objective. It aims to reallocate road and parking spaces to public transport, cycling and walking. Reduced private car traffic is seen as an efficient way to improve road congestion and will concurrently allow for buses to run more freely and timely. Oslo is now a more vibrant, social and environmentally sustainable city. What we can take from this case study is that there's no simple answer to improving the travel time ratio of the bus compared to that of the car. This is a seriously complex and large-scale issue, and providing a faster and more competitive public transport system will be part of a wider political and cultural shift in urban setting. So to conclude, this movement toward a modal transportation shift away from private auto vehicles is evident across the world. For example, in Germany's capital city, Berlin, they committed in 2019 put 28 billion euros toward improving public transport. It's essential that we create a rhetoric shift in paradigm from providing public transport contingent on urban growth predictions to a future of transport that focuses on sustainable forms of travel. Mode shift is at the core of this movement towards sustainable transport in cities worldwide. And improving the travel time of the bus compared to that of the private car is an important part of executing this shift. Thank you.
So can I get the six students who've already presented? We'll grab another couple of chairs and get a panel, and we'll see what questions people have got for you. Now, in terms of those online, if you could either use your hand up or send me a chat, whichever is more convenient for you, and we'll make sure we give you the opportunity to ask some questions. In general, could everybody please be cognizant of the developmental aspect of this? The questions are designed to dig into the curiosity of it and not to try and trip anybody up or pick at the edges of it. Yeah, so if you get really hard questions, send them my way. Just transfer this across. Back of somebody's head. So. Yeah. Oh. So I have one warm-up question to get us started. Yeah, and one of the things I was really impressed with was every now and again when I'd stick my head through the door of the workroom, the conversations between you connecting your studies. That was one of the really impressive things for me. So I guess what I'd like to ask, if anybody's got a really good example of how this group connects across different areas of your study.
I guess I'll speak, why not? I guess like some of the more obvious ones, like we helped each other a lot with implementing personas and the different aspects of it. Me and Alex, we talked about inclusion and diversity, and it was just kind of really interesting to be able to have an idea in your head and then just have a normal conversation with people and realize, oh yeah, this is a much broader, wider section than I originally thought. And there are a lot of connecting pieces.
I think, yeah, what I noticed, so we were all writing reports, and I think most of us have written reports. Like we had, so I know there was one day and I was just like, so I asked Georgia, I was just like, what are you doing and why and how? And then she just sort of like told me the whole process of like how her report was going. I was like, okay, that reassures me. I think I'm on the right track. So I think it was just, yeah, talking about the processes and sort of what stages we're at was really cool to sort of connect with each other and make sure we're on the track. What else?
I guess, yeah, it was just like, I think we helped each other a lot, especially finding references and things. We'd find things and be like, oh, hey, I think this kind of touched on what you're looking at. So that was really nice as well to other people looking out for things that you are researching.
Great. Hive mind. Great. And Rick, you have your hand up. You have a question for the team?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. Awesome research, guys. Super interesting to listen to it, and I feel like it's going to be like very useful for us at Dunedin City Council as we're developing our zero carbon plan. I had a question for Toby on when you were digging into that data. Did you look at the difference between bike and e-bike on the survey responses in terms of distances? Like, there's an assumption that we have that e-bikes allow people to travel longer distances, but I don't know if you were able to do that breakdown or not, or how difficult that would be.
I didn't do that. I think it would be pretty easy. Something that I did look at that's kind of like adjacent to that, I guess, is I broke down fuel types for people who drove or were a passenger in a car. And obviously I can't, like, because I didn't actually write any proper statistical tests, say they actually did differ. But what I found suggested that there wasn't actually that much of a difference. And I think that's because, I mean, I didn't really do very much research, but what I think is that nobody, like the range of electric cars is probably going to be within the distance that people are traveling to work, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. No, there's going to be very few people like driving from Christchurch.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. There was some interesting stuff that I found that EV ownership is highest in that kind of 10 kilometre-ish sort of commuter distance suburbs. One of the, I guess, a question for like most of you was like, did it come up in any of the discussions or research or things like that, looking at whether or not if people had the option of a commuter train between Mosgiel and the CBD, if that would make any difference or not? Or do you think that that kind of trip walking from the railway station to the university campus, like, would be more of a barrier than a benefit, or any, I don't know if that came up at all.
I did look at like considered modes by distance, and I can't remember off the top of my head if train was like a big thing for people that live far away, but there was like a decent percentage of people who said they would consider
Bus.
using a train, although I guess to answer that question better, probably ask people directly if they would use a train that went from Osgood to them, rather than trying to get it from the existing data, because I'll probably be like having to make a few too many assumptions.
I did ask people about that and they said they would definitely use a train. Like they don't mind as long as they'd have somewhere to park their car or bike if they had to walk or bike to get to the beginning of the train, but they'd be very happy to use that if they could.
Do you think like that did you get a sense of like if people would be more likely to catch a train than a bus, or like those, was there a difference in that, do you think? Or?
Yeah, I think people see a train as a faster option because it's direct. You don't have to stop in traffic or anything. So yeah, I think a train is where people were more enthusiastic.
Cool.
Thank you. Questions, Rick?
I could probably go on all day, but
we'll come back to you. We'll do a round of other people and we'll come back to you. And then you probably need a time to catch up with these guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like reading. Oh, that was my general question. The research reports and stuff going to be available, I assume.
They will be
reading them.
Yeah, they'll be both going into the journal and sent out to those who have sort of sponsored them as well.
Okay.
So, question coming in online from Rosella. Really interesting presentation. The conclusion running through this seems to be that we need a more frequent and comprehensive public transport system. In your literature reviews, did anybody see a model of how to pay for this that might be transferable to Aotearoa?
In most of my literature reviews, I didn't delve into the financing side or the government policies involved. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I feel like that was kind of outside the scope of what we were doing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's definitely something of interest for the future.
Yeah, I think a whole new research project could be just focused on how these could be implemented.
Great. And I have, I'll go to Alexa next.
I am Alexa Forbes and I'm co-chair of the Aotearoa Regional Council of Public Transport. And there was some really interesting stuff in there. I'm not sure I didn't see anything I didn't know, but what was wonderful about it was to bring in a complete Dunedin focus. Thank you very much. It's really great public transport in Dunedin and Queenstown. That has its challenges as well. But what I wanted to know here was, I find as a pedestrian, I used to buses in Dunedin and Queenstown, pedestrian often Queenstown and Dunedin, that was there anything in the feedback that talked about safety of walking? I find Dunedin incredibly unsafe as a place to walk. Did that come through?
I had people just talking about that a lot, yeah, the safety of walking and how they didn't want to have to, the big roads that they might have to cross to get to the bus stop. I think it was in Ravensbourne, I think that area, the only way to get to the stop was to go across a huge road, and they didn't like that sort of idea about walking around.
And your survey was scoped really in the demographics of the students and work at Otago University. But there was a little bit around, noticed about people transporting children to school. And I'm wondering if that safety barrier of crossing roads is another big piece all of its own, scope of the scope. Any insights come up?
Yeah, I don't know. But yes, definitely people are worried about, like, some of the children, I think they thought would be are old enough to catch the bus themselves, but they just don't want them walking around like really large roads, and especially sort of because some of the buses were delayed, it ended up being quite dark when they were actually still out there. And so that like safety issue was concerning.
Useful work, thank you. I don't know the line side. In your presentation, you mentioned that in Oslo, was it Oslo?
Yeah.
There was an uptake of people not taking transport and living over the road. Did you see any contrary to that, where businesses might have been impacted in other areas, where parking spaces are removed, and people just end up going to a different region or a different area? So, for example, in Wellington, there is a due to do similar things. Businesses that are suffering because people are just not to town on the weekends. Did you see anything like that, or do you think it's just part of the process of getting people to change behavior?
I definitely think it's part of the process of getting people to change behaviour, but I think the bigger, like looking at it as an overall aim and solution, it would add to having a more like vibrant, social, enjoyable, safe, environmentally friendly future for the city. It's just not feasible to keep relying on cars to come into the middle of the city all the time. And I think in Oslo they did notice that it changed the vibe of the city. You know, there was more people in cafes and the socializing in the city centre because it wasn't sort of overrun by cars. So I think it could actually be a positive. Yeah.
We have another online question. It's quite a biggie here from Sugar. It's a meta question. You have all suggested excellent concrete solutions. Some seem obvious, but others have not been implemented. Do you see institutional barriers to implementation? So, for example, our current university, ORC, and DCC administrative structures up to the challenge?
Oh, that's a big question to tackle.
I guess it's a good one because you've actually been contacted the structure in all of those different organisations in your study between you. So, observations.
Personally, I think it would be, it's a significant change, and I think the best solution would be for all organisations to somehow work together. How plausible that is with timeline and funding, I don't know.
Yeah, funding, that's massive. That's like a huge, but that would prevent these things from happening. Because that's just hard to do, yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's about everyone implementing change, and there's not like one solution. It's going to be more of a long-term, like we need long-term and short-term goals, but we need to sort of look at the bigger picture. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
And the hot potatoes transport, we all need to look after it, not pass it from one organisation to another and blame each other.
Oh.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm interested in your data around the 19% of emissions that came from EFB. Was that just for passenger vehicles, just private vehicles alone? Because that seems very low compared to our ORC data.
Is this through?
I think so. I think it was yours.
It came from the greenhouse emissions report from the Ministry of Environment, so I don't know.
Which I think is low compared to this region, but I might be.
Yeah, it was a country.
And was it just for private, vehicle?
It was for road transport.
For road transport.
I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks. It's useful. The other one was, I wonder, this is a bit random, did anybody think, because I know they did in Oslo when they made those changes in about 2015, was they had really big vision about what happened to the areas that were freed up when you took the cars out of them. And for example, they didn't allow driveways across anything because they made all the street areas activated. You can understand that in an articulate way of expressing. Could anybody think about what happened to the spaces that freed up in the house?
I think there's a lot of potential to really kind of develop a harmonious, active community when we get rid of whole acres that are just dedicated to car parks. I mean, I strongly believe my passion is in community development that is a fully potential area.
There's some other studies outside of this group, but I don't know if James is listening, but James works in surveying, and he has a project where his students take over car parks for a week and look at what else could be done with them. Start thinking creatively. Like another source of info.
So I think, Alex, you mentioned the concept of transit assimilation. So people might come from a place with strong public transport culture and then gradually get crowds down by needed. And I think Georgie mentioned riding the buses for the first time as part of the study, and people so do you have any reflections on riding the buses yourselves, or talking to flatmates or your friends about riding the buses, and some of the prejudices or stigmas that they bring to it, and what lessons can we take as culture change lessons rather than sort of the concrete suggestions?
Well, personally, I originally came from Timaru, which had the little bus shuttle systems. So in Timaru, you would always take those bus systems. It was just a lot easier. And then I moved here, didn't take a bus until now. It's my 5th year. And when I told like my flatmates and friends that I was going on little bus tours, the first thing they said was, are you sure? Like, are you like, where will you end up? How are you getting back? So it was really interesting going from a community like Timaru where you say, I'm taking the bus, and it's like, yep, that's fair, to coming here in Dunedin. And when I mention the word bus, everyone suddenly goes, oh, really now? Okay. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else felt a similar kind of vibe.
Situation, because I come from South Africa and I never actually used public transport before I came to Dunedin, and it took quite a few years to actually start using it, because a lot of what I had for public transport was very negative, especially growing up in South Africa. So coming here, I definitely see a lot of positive for it. Like I see a lot of there's a lot more safety, especially in New Zealand in comparison. However, I do think there's times where it just gets a bit frustrating with the bus system, and you just have to decide, okay, I'm just going to walk for 30 minutes rather than wait for the bus. But I do think, I really do like the buses, and I like being able to take public transport whenever I get the opportunity. But when it becomes extremely unreliable, which a lot of people have talked about, it gets to the point where you just have to cut back and go, I have to set up time to do it on the weekend, and then I can do it then.
I think what I've found talking to friends and family and co-workers and everything is that buses, public transport isn't even really a second option or a third option or any option, or just like people wouldn't consider it. Like I work also in an office about 100 people, and I've talked to quite a few people about like taking the bus. I know one time there's somebody who was completely called out, so it's actually like really? Like how was it? Was it gross? And just like nobody could take it. So yeah, there's a lot of cultural shifts that need to change, because it's really not that bad. From my experience on public transport, and everybody that I've talked to were just like, I've never even taken it before. So it's just like building that routine, and of taking public transport, I think, realizing it's not that bad.
So
Thanks. That was very interesting. So, some of the other councils, council, your research was all based around the university community. Do you have any inkling that might be any significant differences from the wider, or is that a whole other research?
I personally think that there might be, especially when relating to environmental consciousness, because at the university, I guess everyone, they know they should be thinking about that, but I think a lot of the general public, that's not something that they particularly care about. So I feel like maybe they using that as a way to get people who use it wouldn't be very effective, because to them it's not as important.
anyone else got thoughts on that same question?
I think and like most students live sort of close to uni, and over my years of being a student, I've started living further and further away. And it's just, I just walk everywhere. Like I don't have a car, I don't catch a bus, I just walk. If it's cold, I wear a jacket, you know, and even when I'd be walking 25 minutes to get to uni, it's just, I don't know what I did. And I think for the wider general public to get to work, they have to drive or catch a bus. So I think that's quite a big difference. Yeah.
A good person who would be able to give you some insights into that is Hamish Cameron, who's our workplace travel planner, but he's funded by us, DCC and Te Whatuora, and spend days per week in each location, doing workplace travel plans for each. But he's busy becoming a dad, so congratulations to Hamish for becoming a dad. Rick came back to us with data from the 2021 Dunedin emissions inventory. Overall, 34% of the city's emissions are on-road petrol, mostly passenger cars. The transport is 34% of the city's emissions, and on-road petrol, mostly passenger cars, are 7.3% of total emissions.
Thanks.
Eric.
I have two big questions. So the first one is really surprised from the survey responses. No one really mentioned it's a problem when the bus don't tell you which stop is arriving. Because for me, I feel really scary if I have to take this route for the first time and I totally have no idea where the bus is stopping there. So yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone mentioned this kind of question in the survey. And the second question is actually for Alexandra. So you mentioned placing moral value into public transportation. So I'm actually curious if any other city councils are doing that, because it sounds like a very vague concept for me. I totally have no idea how this is done. So I'm just wondering if you have any examples.
Well, it is quite a vague topic because when I was doing quite a lot of my research, I came across, I don't know the name exactly, but I find it up, show it to you. There was a presentation done, I think around last year, on the public transport system. And it was by, I think, two researchers, and they were talking about growing up and the experiences as being Maori and how the public transport system did a lot of the educational experience to have, but how a lot of the experiences they weren't able to experience a lot of the normal things that a lot of other Maori kids could experience because they couldn't go to a lot of these sites, they couldn't attend to these places. And throughout, I included in my report more deeply, but they give a few more suggestions of what more values and knowledge they would add to it. But because I don't have a lot of that knowledge, because I'm also still learning a lot about New Zealand culture and Maori culture, I would have to just refer to my report.
Any other questions online or in the room? Which case, I've already noted Hamish's absence and sort of recognise what he's busy doing at the moment. Yeah, but I'd also like to recognise the funders for the students in this. So with the Transport Research Network, Otago Regional Council and BBC, thanks very much for supporting these students to do these investigations over the summer in this session and all of the outputs after it possible as well. So thank you very much to the funders. Thank you very much, everybody. Time for a break at 11:15. The next session starts in here, and it is a waste session. Thank you very much.